I was always tense. I couldn't relax. I had panic attacks. I really had many times in my life where I wanted to die. But it was therapy that changed my life.
How did the betrayal by your mother, especially the effect it had on you to trust others, maybe women, caregivers?
I really loved my grandmother, but I did have a hard time with any intimate relationship. And I never had those really close girlfriends for a long time. I look back on it, and whether, as a young woman, I had an easier time working for men than women, I don't know. Um, but I couldn't trust anybody. I mean, I was a solo. There was only one other person that I would, and even her, I would tailor what I said, was my sister. But I really had a hard time making intimate female friends. Now that has changed. As I've, with help. I mean, I love my female friends, the women in my life, and you know, and it's interesting because I've even become more open and more giving. I've become a better friend. I was not a great friend for a really long time. I had to take care of myself. I lived on survival mode. I probably didn't show up for people the way that they needed, but that's changed. And I think that, when you're always trying doggy paddling, so to speak, through deep sea, it's really hard to reach back. I was a nurse. At work, I could do it, but in my personal life, it's hard. You're busy. You can barely function.
Yeah, like you said, survival mode. And that was not your fault because you were having trust issues.
Yeah. And I've learned with time to trust people. Here and there, it still comes up. If I think someone has let me down, I get really hurt really quickly. And I really have to sit down with it and breathe through it. And also realize, everyone is not thinking about me all the time as much as I might think so, but it's taken some time.
So it left you sensitive then.
Oh, yeah, I was very sensitive. I was both sensitive and cold at the same time, which is a funny thing to say. But I think that happens, right? You get so afraid of somebody hurting you that you just stay distant or stay away. Like I said, I always stayed just a little bit out of the friend group. I was always the person who floated between friend groups and never got too close to anyone.
And that was when that also is the reason why you dissociate as well. Just like,
Yeah.
okay, I don't want too many closeness. I don't want to get too intimate or
Yeah.
emotional with anyone. But with
And
help, you're better.
yeah, with help, I am better. I mean, I am an advocate of therapy. There's many different modalities of therapy, and not everything works the same for everyone, but it was therapy that changed my life. I do think, I let therapy in. If I hadn't gotten help when I did and hadn't kept getting help over the years, I really had many times in my life where I wanted to die. And, sometimes it was only the grace of God, or maybe I didn't really want to, but I think about this a lot when I know people who have committed suicide, and I wonder about that one moment a lot. I luckily never fell off that edge, but I know what it's like to be so miserable in life that death seems like a better alternative.
Yes, I do understand where you're coming from because I've gone through it myself. Like I said, I also went through domestic abuse, and therapy was a life force for me. It saved me. Apart from Jesus, it saved me, because I was having depressive episodes, PTSD, post-traumatic stress disorder,
Mhm.
and I had the complex time. And then,
I also do.
yeah.
Yeah,
So
obviously.
anxiety issues, and dissociation, numbing, and things like that. So I do understand what you're saying. And it does appear in our bodies. And that leads me to my next question. Or what did your body try to tell you over the years that your mind had learned to ignore?
Well,
Sometimes trauma is embedded in our bodies, could appear on your chest, autoimmune diseases, all sorts.
so for me, I honestly became a person who lived here. I realized it, it's a funny thing. I had, up until a few years ago, really terrible posture. hunch over, I would hold in. I was always tense. Even now, my body is always, I work on it. I do a lot of yoga now, a lot of yoga, and a lot of body work. And I've learned how to live in my body a little bit because I tried to shut my body down. So that was how it really appeared for me in my body, is that I was always hunched. I was always tense. I couldn't relax. Of course, I had panic attacks. The moments where you just can't breathe, and I feel like an icicle is stabbing you in the chest and your throat closes. I was, always feeling that feeling of my throat closing and itching. And if I tried to speak, so those are the ways it appeared. I think also, the addiction to self-harm in my body. I did not have any autoimmune diseases that I'm aware of, but picked my body together, and as I said, I really tried to stay in here. I just pretended my body didn't exist. And it was I had kind of a curvy figure. I was thin, and men would definitely pay attention, and as I went from extremes of either, as I said, hypersexualizing it to just covering it up. I just didn't know what to do with my body. So yeah, and I don't know, I had very bad menstrual periods, so for years, and I don't know if that was related, is whether that was part of it. And then I'd have long periods where I wouldn't have a menstrual period. So I'm sure all of that was related to the stress.
Yeah, the trauma.
Yeah. But I was a person, I remember if people came too close, I would flinch. I mean, I wasn't a hugger. Now I'm a hugger, but I couldn't. People would come too close. I still have moments, like a car will boom, a car will backfire, and I still have moments where I'll jump. Those kinds of things still happen a little bit. I was so hyper vigilant for so long. I write that I could not differentiate between a situation that was dangerous and a situation that was safe.
I can resonate with that, being hyper vigilant. It happens to me as well. Even up till now, I'm hyper vigilant. So how did you present yourself to the world while hiding this part of your story?
I think I tried to present myself as presentable as possible. I think part of it was, and I am very lucky and this was a gift from my mother, and to some extent even my father, is the love of books, the love of school. Despite the abuse, and it's such a pretty picture, my parents had high expectations of me academically. And I think I presented myself as somebody who did well in school, who, this nice pretty little girl, this nice pretty older girl. And I really started believing my mother story, which is that I didn't believe that the abuse didn't happen. I never believed that. But that I kept thinking, if I was smart enough, if I was good enough, if I was perfect enough, if I was pretty enough, if I could present to the world this pretty picture, then I could pretend that none of this ever happened, and I could pretend it so well that I could forget it. And I could just move on. I really kind of tried to internalize that as a message to myself. Obviously, with all the other things going on, it didn't work so well. I realize in retrospect, I was probably, I don't know, I don't think I was fooling anybody. There was always something a little bit off. But I really tried to present that picture.
Thank you. Be safe and be positive. And don't forget to check out our social media handles. Thank you. Bye for now.